Orochimaru is one of the most interesting characters in all of Naruto and Boruto. He is quite literally the only bad guy who has survived. Zabuza, the Akatsuki, Obito, Madara, all gone, but Orochimaru is still around. Because of this, Orochimaru has kind of earned the reputation of being a cockroach. The kind of man who will do absolutely anything within his powers to stay alive. And while I do believe calling him a cockroach is an accurate moniker because he's almost impossible to kill, Orochimaru still being around is a testament to his intelligence and his power. What if I told you that the real reason that Orochimaru is still around in the story to this day is not because of his intelligence or his power, but because Kishimoto has much bigger plans for him than simply just being some small-scale bad guy? What if the scale of what Orochimaru wants to accomplish is much larger than destroying Konoha or figuring out every single ninjutsu, and in reality, Orochimaru is actually an Otsutsuki, a man with galactic-level plans trying to reascend to godhood. And while this may sound like an insane stretch, there's actually a fair amount of evidence to support this theory. And think about it, Orochimaru going from Naruto's first big real villain to its final boss would be quite the full circle moment. This might be one of the more bulletproof theories I've ever proposed on this page. I'd be lying if I said I could entirely take all of the credit for it. The idea was originally proposed by a YouTube comment, though I have done a lot of research and added a lot more to this theory to make it even more plausible. So with no further ado, let's get into, is Orochimaru an Otsutsuki? But before we get to extrapolating on any theories here, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you love the sound of my voice extrapolating on theories, then you're gonna absolutely love my other page, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about theories from Naruto, I talk about theories from MHA, like who Deku's father is, or theories from Hunter x Hunter, like where Nanika actually came from. So, Orochimaru, one of the most iconic characters in Naruto's entire universe. Once an orphan, brought in by Hiruzen to be raised the hero of the leaf and possibly to be the fourth Hokage. Upon losing Tsunade's little brother as a part of his original Genin squad, Orochimaru headed down the dark path in the pursuit of all knowledge about all ninjutsu. The desire for this knowledge of everything made Orochimaru realize that he couldn't accomplish it in one lifetime. And thus the idea of figuring out every secret in ninjutsu brought Orochimaru to the pursuit of immortality. But the pursuit of immortality doesn't come at a low price. And it wasn't long before Orochimaru was committing war crimes and crimes against humanity simply in order to find a way to continue his life long beyond its natural lifespan. And upon that long and dark and arduous path, Orochimaru found how to switch his consciousness into the bodies of others. And while this was only a temporary stopgap, as he only had 3 years in bodies that weren't considered the perfect vessels, Orochimaru had found a path to immortality. And upon accomplishing the small feat of immortality, Orochimaru once again started down the path of mastering every single ninjutsu. But unfortunately for Orochimaru, some ninjutsu were gone, like wood release, which meant in order to get a fundamental understanding of ninjutsu that had disappeared from the earth, Orochimaru would have to recreate them, which is what brought Orochimaru to human experimentation, where children like Shin Uchiha and Yamato were created. But Konoha rejected Orochimaru's lack of morals and threw him out of the village, which led to Orochimaru growing a natural resentment for Konoha and trying to destroy it. That is until we get to the end of Naruto and Orochimaru is faced with a threat in Madara that is threatening his chance of mastering all ninjutsu. Can't master all ninjutsu while you're stuck in a cocoon. And thus, in order to make sure that he would be able to pursue his path of infinite knowledge, Orochimaru and Naruto and the rest of the villages worked together. And upon working together, a working relationship was made where Orochimaru would come back to Konoha under the surveillance of Konoha to do his research. He's one of the most titillizing, interesting, and intelligent characters in the entirety of Naruto. And yet in Boruto, it seems as though he's taken a relative step backwards. Or has he? See, there's actually been relatively compelling evidence proposed in Boruto, especially recently, that Orochimaru may be the grand mastermind behind basically everything going on. And I have a strong, and I mean strong, suspicion that Orochimaru may not be the person that we even believe him to be. Because I believe that Orochimaru is an Otsutsuki. But what do I mean when I say that? If Orochimaru was an Otsutsuki, why wouldn't he go along with Madara's plan? Why wouldn't he try to grow a divine tree of himself and eat the chakra fruit? Why wouldn't he have helped Ishiki? Why wouldn't he have helped Momoshiki? Well, I'm not entirely sure Orochimaru knows he's an Otsutsuki. Let's get some of the obvious things out of the way here. Orochimaru, obviously, just like the rest of the Otsutsuki, has pale skin. And not just I'm a white dude who hasn't been outside in a week, ghostly pale skin, borderline translucent. Now, the explanation of Orochimaru's appearance was always that somehow it was tied into snakes, as he also has yellow slitted eyes and purple markings on the inside of his eyes. And while just the basis of them both having white pasty skin isn't enough to be like, oh, obviously Orochimaru is an Otsutsuki, the fact that Orochimaru has exactly the same skin tone as every single Otsutsuki we've ever seen is a bit suspicious. But I know what you're saying. You're saying,
well, if Orochimaru was an Otsutsuki, wouldn't he have the Byakugan?
and you're absolutely right, he should. The base eye for any Otsutsuki member is the Byakugan, meaning if they don't have a Sharingan or a Rinnegan in one of their eyes, they have a Byakugan. Momoshiki had 2 Byakugan, Ishiki had 1, Kaguya had 2, Kinshiki had 2. If you don't have some kind of other dojutsu as an Otsutsuki, you have the Byakugan. So why doesn't Orochimaru? Well, that could be for a couple of separate reasons. And really, this is where the one theory splits into 2 theories. You see, the first theory that we're going to talk about relies on the fact that we know that Otsutsukis can breed with humans, as Kaguya and her husband Tenzo were able to create Hamura and Hagoromo, who then subsequently basically made every single human on Earth. In essence, almost every single ninja on Earth can draw their lineage back to Kaguya. On top of that, we understand it only took 2 generations of humans breeding with Otsutsuki to A, get a different color of skin, and B, to lose the Byakugan. What do I mean by that? Both Hagoromo and Hamura had the Byakugan. And while obviously at some point Hagoromo awoke to the Sharingan and then subsequently the Rinnegan, at one point in time, Hagoromo did have a Byakugan. However, the trait for the Byakugan didn't pass down to the Uchiha or the Senju. And in fact, the only people who currently have the Byakugan can draw their lineage back to Hamura. And even within the confines of the Hyuga clan, we understand that if you breed outside of the Hyuga clan for 1 to 2 generations, you lose the Byakugan. Mokai Kohinata's parents had been outside of the Hyuga clan for 1 or 2 generations, and he was only born with 1 Byakugan. Well, Himawari and Boruto's mother is a full-blooded Hyuga, which makes them half Hyuga, and neither of them are walking around with the Byakugan, as Himawari's eyes are usually blue, but she's able to turn them into a Byakugan, and Boruto just doesn't have one at all. So what I'm taking a very, very long path at here is that it's entirely possible that an Otsutsuki came down to Earth, bred with humans, and then somewhere along that lineage, Orochimaru was created. And that still raises the question, and possibly answers the question, of why Orochimaru looks the way he does. Could Orochimaru's parents have been an Otsutsuki and possibly a snake sage? Which would not only give Orochimaru the pale skin of an Otsutsuki, but the snake-like appearance he currently has. And since he's only half Otsutsuki, would that explain why he either doesn't have a Byakugan or it isn't fully manifested all of the time, like Himawari? And here's the thing, there's actually relatively compelling evidence to suggest that Orochimaru might have a tie-in to dojutsu abilities. See, we all know, if you've seen the first 30 or so episodes of Boruto, that Orochimaru was now able to completely remake Sharingan. Orochimaru created hundreds of artificial Sharingan and then implanted them in all of Shin Uchiha's clones. On top of this, Orochimaru is also able to make Mangekyo Sharingan, as the Mangekyo Sharingan that Shin had that allowed him to teleport and control weapons was created by Orochimaru, along with all of the other Sharingan that were implanted into his body. On top of this, it was recently, and I mean incredibly recently, revealed that Orochimaru created a set of glasses that is able to steal somebody else's dojutsu and give it to who's ever wearing the glasses. In Naruto Retsudan, the light novel sequel to Sasuke Retsudan, which is getting its own manga right now, Orochimaru comes to Naruto's house to show off a pair of glasses. And if you wear these glasses, simply by looking at somebody with a dojutsu, you take their ability to use the dojutsu. And thus Orochimaru, by putting these glasses on and simply staring at Hinata, is able to use her Byakugan. And while the user of these glasses is using the dojutsu of the person they stole it from, the person they stole it from cannot use their dojutsu. And while obviously Orochimaru is an incredible genius who's shown off a myriad of different shinobi wear and ninjutsu feats throughout the duration of Naruto's entire run, is the ability to steal and seal jutsus from other people, not inherently an Otsutsuki ability, as this is not only one of the abilities of the Rinnegan, it's also the ability of the Rinnegans in Momoshiki's palms. It's also an ability of the Karma Seal, except for some reason this ability is specific to dojutsu, as if Orochimaru was somehow trying to reclaim the ability to use dojutsu, something that the diluting of his Otsutsuki bloodline had caused him to lose. But alright, maybe a random Otsutsuki descending down to Earth and having a bunch of children that later became Orochimaru feels like a stretch to you. Well then, I'd like to point out that this feels like a really good time to point out that in chapter 35 of Boruto, when Sasuke stumbled upon Kara's hideout, there seemed to be 3 sets of Otsutsuki symbols. Now, each of these 3 sets had 2 symbols, with each symbol being representative of one of the members of the Otsutsuki pair. At the time, we didn't know that one of these sets represented Kaguya and Ishiki, but we did know that the other set represented Momoshiki and Kinshiki. But what's weird is that these 2 sets are complete while the 3rd set is destroyed, as if this duo of Otsutsuki had either been killed or cast off. Because to Kara, the Otsutsuki are God. Inners like Code revere the Otsutsuki and want to live up to their godly presence. So why would they destroy the symbol of one specific Otsutsuki pair? Now, the way that some people will explain away what's going on here is that the symbols belong to Orochimaru and Toneri. But that doesn't make any sense because Orochimaru and Toneri just don't know each other. Orochimaru actually pulls up to the moon and fights against Toneri, at which point that Toneri says that he thought that the fate of the Otsutsuki clan was going to end with him, implying that Toneri didn't know that there was other Otsutsukis out there. And then after that, Orochimaru says that the main family isn't happy with the way that Toneri lost to the humans, to which Toneri responds, the main family? Once again implying that Toneri doesn't know about other Otsutsukis. Not to mention Orochimaru is anime canon. He's not even manga canon. So why would something in the manga reflect an anime canon character? And Oroshiki's not like the Jogan or Kishimoto said that eventually it would become manga canon. Orochimaru is just straight up anime canon, which means he's basically a filler character. What if instead the 2 symbols were a representation of a duo of Otsutsukis that ascended to the earth hundreds of years ago, which would explain why the 2 symbols that are cracked and broken are also overgrown? And what if that duo, upon ascending down to earth, decided they didn't want to destroy it and simply had children? Hell, for that matter, these 2 symbols could be representative of a parent and a child. And there was actually a recent development in the most recent chapter of Boruto that points towards this possibly being a very plausible theory. You see, the other way that it's a possibility that Orochimaru isn't a full-blooded Otsutsuki but still ties his heritage back to the Otsutsuki is that recently in the most recent chapter of Boruto, chapter 75, we learned about Shibai Otsutsuki. And Shibai Otsutsuki is the only Otsutsuki we know of to achieve godhood. The only Otsutsuki to have gone through enough karmic reincarnations and eaten enough chakra fruits to ascend to the perfect being. But because Shibai Otsutsuki had essentially become God in the perfect being, he abandoned his body. And that body now exists on Earth, meaning that technically Shibai Otsutsuki is dead, though he just ascended to a different dimension to live out his life as a god. But his corpse residing on the earth brings a myriad of problems for Earth, as all of the innate abilities of Shibai Otsutsuki still reside within his DNA. And thus Amado, a scientist from Boruto, was able to take DNA from Shibai's body and create cyborgs with it that were able to use one of his incredibly powerful Shinjutsu abilities. So I propose that it's entirely a possibility that the symbol seen in the Kara hideout is actually a representation of Shibai, as it's a possibility that he descended down to earth and abandoned his bodily vessel there to ascend to a different dimension. And thus the symbols of the Kara hideout are possibly a representation of Shibai's body and his spirit. Okay, but how does talk about Shibai Otsutsuki tie into Orochimaru? Well, we know that a genius scientist like Amado was able to transplant abilities from Shibai into cyborgs using his DNA. But what if, hypothetically, someone were to simply graft some of Shibai Otsutsuki's DNA onto their body? Or what if Shibai Otsutsuki had somebody marked with a karma so that he could reincarnate, but instead he ascended to a different plane, no longer needing his karmic reincarnation? Well, the person with that karma seal would still undergo Otsutsufication. Though they themselves would never become the Otsutsuki who marked them, they would become an Otsutsuki. But in both the circumstance of Boruto and Kawaki, who are now fully Otsutsufied, neither has a Byakugan. And what happened when Ishiki's soul disappeared from the plane of existence that Kawaki existed in? So did his karma seal. And the only reason that Kawaki currently has a karma seal is because Amado put it back on him. And thus anybody who had a karma seal marking from Shibai Otsutsuki would watch it disappear, as Shibai Otsutsuki's soul had left their dimension, in the same way that Ishiki's soul after dying most likely ascended to the Pure Lands dimension. Because within Naruto, souls can't die, they simply ascend to the Pure Lands, which is a different dimension. And considering the fact that Hagoromo's soul now exists in the Pure Lands means that this also applies to Otsutsuki. But whether you believe Orochimaru was either the offspring of the Otsutsuki or a failed karmic reincarnation, or even possibly somebody who was able to graft part of Shibai's corpse onto his body, the moral of the story, it doesn't matter how you get there, is that Orochimaru is partially Otsutsuki, and he's trying to regather the strength of the Otsutsuki. And there is a lot of evidence for this. Let's take a look at things that Orochimaru has done recently. Orochimaru recently created Mitsuki, his son. And while Mitsuki is technically a clone of Orochimaru, he looks nothing like Orochimaru. I mean, yes, obviously he's got pale skin and yellow eyes, but his pupils aren't slitted. He's got regular pupils, which is weird when we consider the fact that he is a clone of Orochimaru and therefore should look exactly like Orochimaru. But the reason that Orochimaru created Mitsuki is because he wanted to be able to master Snake Sage mode. See, during Orochimaru's lifetime, there has never been a perfect Snake Sage, and thus Orochimaru has never been able to fully study a perfect Snake Sage and understand it fully. However, Orochimaru understands that he had the ability to gather Shinjutsu and mix it perfectly. His body just wasn't strong enough to undergo the transformation into a Snake Sage. But if Orochimaru's body wasn't strong enough to undergo the transformation into a Snake Sage, then it wouldn't make sense for him to just clone himself. Because if he were just to make a carbon copy clone of himself, it wouldn't make any difference. That would just be him, and that clone wouldn't be any stronger than Orochimaru. Thus, just taking his DNA and replicating it into a new body wasn't enough. Orochimaru needed to make his body stronger, and thus Orochimaru spliced his DNA with somebody else's in order to make a powerful clone that would be able to master Snake Sage mode. But who would be powerful enough? I mean, Kabuto wasn't able to become a Snake Sage, Sasuke never tried, Naruto was a Toad Sage. Who gave Orochimaru the best possible chance at making a clone who could master Snake Sage mode? Well, fortunately for Orochimaru, about 2 to 3 years after the completion of the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, the perfect candidate was placed in his lap, and that would be none other than Toneri Otsutsuki. See, while it's entirely possible that Orochimaru would have been able to get Madara or Obito's DNA, there was no guarantee they would have any chemistry with the Great White Snake Sage. And let's not forget what Obito and Madara were trying to accomplish: becoming Otsutsuki. So when Naruto and Hinata came into combat against Toneri Otsutsuki in the last, Orochimaru took it upon himself to gather DNA from possibly their clothes or traveling to the moon from Toneri that he could splice with his own to create a clone. But why do I say Toneri Otsutsuki? Well, one, Mitsuki and Log, who is the older version of Mitsuki, have Toneri's hair color. Like, exactly. Also, Orochimaru had to acquire round pupils from somewhere, and Toneri absolutely has those. Also, when Mitsuki enters his Snake Sage mode, his chakra color is the exact same color as Toneri's. In fact, Mitsuki's Snake Sage mode looks exactly like Toneri's Tenseigan mode. Not to mention, Log is most likely 4 to 5 years older than Mitsuki, which would align perfectly with when the last happened. And as Log and Mitsuki and all the other clones in Orochimaru's lab are all the same clone, just made differently, Log being the oldest clone we've seen and lining up perfectly with when Naruto and Hinata fought against Toneri, kind of points a lot of fingers at Toneri. There's also the fact that Mitsuki is obsessed with the moon, somewhat compulsively, staring at it, referring to himself as the moon, which is ironically where Toneri lives. So why would Orochimaru be trying to create the perfect clone? Well, it's entirely possible that a clone's ability to use perfect Snake Sage mode is a representation of how much of the Otsutsuki DNA they got from Toneri and Orochimaru. And therefore, if one of Orochimaru's clones was able to perfectly pull off Snake Sage mode, that is the one he would be able to sacrifice to a Ten-Tails to grow a perfect god tree. Now that's a possibility. There's also the possibility that Orochimaru, regardless of what his DNA looks like, is just intrigued by ninjutsu. I genuinely think this is the more likely scenario, as Otsutsuki or not, wanting to learn every single ninjutsu actually plays into our theory perfectly. See, another thing we learned in this most recent chapter of Boruto is that all ninjutsu, genjutsu, taijutsu are hollow facsimiles of Shinjutsu. Shinjutsu being referred to as divine miracles, a level of ninjutsu only accomplishable by those who have reached godhood. Things like Ishiki's dojutsu ability to control the size of things and reach into other dimensions and grab previously stored objects, Code's claw marks, Ada Senrigan, and the karma are all Shinjutsu. And it was explained to us that every single ninjutsu created is simply an attempt to get back to Shinjutsu. So if Orochimaru is hypothetically a descendant or just an offshoot of Shibai Otsutsuki, him trying to learn every single ninjutsu, genjutsu, and sage mode could be him trying to re-accomplish Shinjutsu. Because even though Orochimaru himself isn't strong enough to pull off Shinjutsu, with a complete understanding of all of the offshoots of Shinjutsu, he could figure out a pathway to get back to Shinjutsu. On top of that, there's also the fact at the end of chapter 75, Boruto gets a Jogan vision. And in this Jogan vision, Snake Sage mode Mitsuki is battling against a karma marked Kawaki. Now, there's a couple of explanations for why Mitsuki and Kawaki would be fighting. First of which is that Mitsuki is in love with Ada because of her ability to entrance anybody who stares at her, but Ada is in love with Kawaki, and therefore Mitsuki is attacking Kawaki out of jealousy. The second is that Mitsuki finds out that Kawaki tried to kill Boruto, as Mitsuki already alluded to the fact that if he found the person who tried to kill Boruto, he doesn't know what he would do, implying that after Mitsuki finds out that Kawaki was the person who donut holed Boruto, that Mitsuki will rage out and try to kill Kawaki. And the third and final explanation is that Mitsuki is being used in order to make Kawaki a sacrifice for the Ten Tails to create a divine tree. And considering the fact that Mitsuki has a cursed seal on his heart, this is absolutely something Orochimaru could force him into doing. But Mitsuki isn't even the first time that Orochimaru has had suspect interests. In the very beginning of Naruto, Orochimaru was obsessed with a Shikatsu Miyaku. More specifically than anything, he was obsessed with Kimimaru, the sole survivor of the Kaguya clan. See, Orochimaru figured that Kimimaru would be his perfect vessel, the vessel that would allow him to live for years without being rejected after 3 years. But why was Kimimaru the perfect vessel? I mean, obviously he held a Kekigenkai that was both incredibly powerful and very rare, but why would that make him a perfect vessel? Could it be that hypothetically, on top of wanting Shikatsu Miyaku, Orochimaru figured that descendants of Kaguya would be his best possible fate? Because let's not forget, the Kaguya clan are descendants of Kaguya. The Shikatsu Miyaku is an offshoot of her ash all-killing bone, and thus the Kaguya clan are technically closer to Otsutsuki than anybody else on Earth. So if Orochimaru with his possibly Otsutsuki DNA were to switch into Kimimaru's body, it would be the perfect fit because Kimimaru would also have Otsutsuki DNA. Also, Orochimaru's obsession with a Kekigenkai that ties its lineage to Kaguya is a point for our theory. There's also the undeniable fact that the curse seal that Orochimaru created and planted on a bunch of people is eerily similar to the karma marking. While possibly less efficient, but also possibly more efficient, the curse seal and the karma marking have undeniable likenesses. In both situations, power can be lent from the person placing the mark to the person it's being placed on. In the case of a curse seal user is able to draw on Orochimaru's ability to pull in Shinjutsu chakra, effectively making any person with a curse marking a sage whenever they activate their curse mark. However, the downside of a curse mark is that the more you use a curse mark, the more likely you are to obey Orochimaru, meaning that the more that you use the curse mark, the more Orochimaru takes over your mind. The karma marking is really no different. Those who have the karma marking are able to activate it to tap into the power of the Otsutsuki. This is possible because anybody who has a karma marking on them slowly but surely becomes an Otsutsuki. And as the karma marking seeps into their body and makes them 100% Otsutsuki, they become the perfect breeding ground for an Otsutsuki reincarnation. In essence, having a karma marking placed on you slowly but surely takes over your body, much in the same way as a curse marking. On top of this, both a curse mark and a karma mark can be used for reincarnation. We know this as Orochimaru leaves a small part of his DNA and chakra in every single curse mark, and thus by taking that DNA and that chakra and putting it on tissue that can grow into a new body, Orochimaru is able to be reincarnated. Obviously, the way a karma seal works is different, with it essentially working as a hard drive of the entire consciousness and DNA of the person who places it on somebody else. And once that hard drive is completely downloaded onto the computer that is the person who it's been placed on, whenever the person who places it dies, they can upload their consciousness back into the person who they placed it on. And the curse seal and the karma marking can both be placed on multiple people. However, if you hypothetically have multiple curse seals on multiple different people, if you reincarnate through one of them, the rest of those curse seals won't disappear. This unfortunately is not the case for karma markings. As the second a karma marking is used, the karma marking on every other vessel disappears. Also, a karma marking and a curse seal come with a lot of consequences, most specifically in the placing of them. As with curse seals, only 1 in 10 people survive, and a karma marking is highly dependent on who's placing it on you, but it took Ishiki 1,000 years to find somebody who would survive getting a karma seal marking from him. But since we're talking about techniques that take over people's body, let's also remember for a second that Kabuto once grafted part of Orochimaru's skin onto his body. Much in the same way that we hypothesized that Orochimaru might have taken some of Shibai's flesh and grafted it onto himself, Kabuto took some of Orochimaru's flesh and grafted it onto himself to gain more power. However, upon grafting Orochimaru's flesh onto his body, he did gain more power, but Orochimaru's consciousness tried to take over Kabuto's body. And though Kabuto did find himself with a couple of Orochimaru's abilities, Orochimaru's consciousness started to seep into Kabuto's consciousness, much in the same way we see with a karma marking. So the real question to ask here is, why would Orochimaru's consciousness seep into Kabuto's consciousness if he's just a regular dude? Why would his body try to take over Kabuto's upon being grafted to it? And I mean, think about it, genuinely. Orochimaru has 2 grand goals in this world: immortality and all knowledge. But considering Considering the new information we have from Boruto, those two goals sound a lot like two separate Shinjutsu. The Otsutsukis have been able to accomplish immortality through the form of karma markings, and with the use of the Senrigan, Ada's dojutsu ability that allows her to see everything that's going on Earth and everything that has gone on Earth, she is essentially all-knowing. So wouldn't it make sense that Orochimaru is trying to amass all of the ninjutsu, genjutsu, taijutsu, and senjutsu prowess information on Earth in order to recreate Shinjutsu in himself? Listen, I'm not saying that this theory is concrete or bulletproof, and I don't even truly understand what Orochimaru's intentions would be if he were an Otsutsuki, or if he is an Otsutsuki, if he's even aware of it. What I do understand, though, is that there's too much evidence pointing at a similarity between Orochimaru and the Otsutsuki to deny. So while I do genuinely believe that this is all of the evidence of connection between Orochimaru and the Otsutsuki, I'm curious as to what you guys think is the real meat behind this theory. Do you believe that Orochimaru is trying to make his own god tree? Or that his intentions are the same regardless of what his DNA is? He's just trying to master all ninjutsu on Earth. Or if possibly he's trying to make the perfect clone in order to feed to the god tree to create a chakra fruit. Or if he's possibly an offshoot of Shibai Otsutsuki, either trying to revive Shibai Otsutsuki or retrace his footsteps. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. And while you're down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Listen, there's only like 5 or 6 people with ghostly white skin. They need to be related.